Hello and welcome to part 5 of our 5-part video series looking at how to create this cordial bottle design. In this final video, what we'll be doing is the fun stuff. We'll be looking at how to create these renders using the rendering workspace within Fusion 360. What I'll do is I'll just go through some of the basics of how to do this. There's a lot of different features and a lot of different things that you can tweak within the rendering workspace. So I'm not going to go into everything because you can have a play around afterwards. But I'll just cover the basics of how to do that. So let's get started. So once you're happy with your bottle design and you've applied all the features you want to, and you think it looks good to go, what we need to do then is render the design. And the way we do that is by changing the workspace here. So we're currently in the design workspace, but what we'll need to do is we'll actually need to go to the render workspace. But before we do that, let's just make sure we save the design. So if it crashes, we've got no problems. And then let's go into the render workspace. And as with so many of the other features in Fusion, there's a left to right flow with this. So we tend to start over here and work our way across to the final rendering. And at this stage, we can, if you want to, change appearances of materials and things like that. So in the design, obviously, we've applied a blue to the glass and I think a purple to the liquid inside it, and so on and so forth. But if any of these things don't look right, you can go into the appearance here and change these within this workspace if you want to. So for example, with the glass inside that I've used to imitate the liquid, if that color's not right, I can edit that here and change that as well. All right, so where we're going to start with this is with the scene settings. So this will set up what the scene's going to look like, whether we want a background color, and if so, what color do we want it? Not that one. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. And obviously, as well, there's lots of things in here that we can play with. But what I'm going to do first of all is go to the environment library, because there's a range of different things we can apply here. So different lighting techniques, also different background images that we'll talk about in a second. But what I'm just going to do actually is come back to settings and change the background from solid color to environment. So if I use an environment from the environment library, let's say for example photo booth, it will not only change the lighting effects when I drag this and drop this onto here, but it will also change what the background looks like as well. So let's just give that a second to catch up and you'll see what I mean. There we are. So the background now is not just a flat color, but the photo booth effect we've got on here, it's also reflected in the color and the light source in the background as well. And some of these are quite fun down here. For example, this is a winter cordial design. So I could drop snowfield onto here. And what that will do is change the lighting, but also make it look like there is a snowfield in the background. There we are. So just like that. And I can zoom out or zoom in, change the size of the design within that space. But hang on, let me just tweak this. There we go. So you can place that in there. You can tweak all the settings and work away until you are happy. Let's just have a look at my settings. Let's go into here. What do I want? Focal length. Let's change that. If I reduce this, we get a more sort of exaggerated perspective on the design. That might be good if you're showing off a feature, for example, on the top of the bottle, or if you want it to look a little bit less exaggerated, you can up the focal length. I'm going to go with something like this. Do you want the reflection showing flat and ground? Do you want the shadows on? You can change all sorts of things in here, but that's something I think you can do on your own. So in terms of what I'm going to do at this stage, I'm just going to leave this as we've got it because I'm kind of happy with that. And I'm going to move on. So the next thing we're going to look at for the purposes of this tutorial is the in-canvas render. And what this will do is it will create a rendering of the design, a rough rendering of the design, just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like when we eventually render it. So you can start to see what the colours are going to look like, what the label's going to look like, what the glass will look like. And even though this isn't a finished rendering, or will be eventually, but I'm not going to wait that long, we can have a look and see roughly what things are going to look like. So I'm happy with that, I think. And therefore I'm going to pause it. So if you don't pause it, every time you change the angle, oh no, hang on. I was going to say every time you change the angle, it will start re-rendering again, but that pausing does not stop it. You have to come up here and go to In Canvas, Render, Stop. There we go. So I can change the angle without it trying to re-render every single time. There we go. Let's go with that. So the final thing we need to do then, once we're happy and we think it looks good, is come into the render settings over here. And what you can do here is change the quality settings. You can change the amount of pixels and so on and so forth. Whether you render it on the cloud or on your own computer. So I'm going to use the cloud because then Autodesk's computers do the heavy lifting, and then your computer just downloads the results of that. So let's have a look at what settings to use. I want a 1080p, I think. And obviously you can choose whatever aspect ratios and qualities you want within this, but I'm going to go with 1080p, I'm going to go with a cloud render, and I want final quality. And what it says here is render queue time less than 20 minutes. So what happens is when I click render, which I'll do now, it puts this rendering into a queue. It uploads the data to the Autodesk servers, and it will sit in a queue until it's ready to be rendered. Now, obviously, at busy times of the day or busy times of the year, the queue time might be longer, but at the moment it's saying less than 20 minutes, which, to be honest, I've never seen it be anything other than that. So at some point, once this is uploaded to the server, which I think it is, this will start rendering. You'll see that happening down here. So that's currently waiting in the Autodesk servers to be rendered. Maybe I want to do another rendering of what the top looks like. So maybe I could just change the view to that. And again, maybe do another render and queue that one up. And this will appear here. There we are. And let's have a look. Is there any others I want? Maybe a nice one. There we go. That looks nice. Catching the back of the design like this. And it doesn't matter actually. If you go slightly off the top and bottom, what I tend to find is that with a 1080p sort of resolution, if you like, this field of view doesn't represent what you end up with. There's actually a lot more top and bottom. So very often I find if you do this, where it just about goes off the top and bottom, you tend to get a better result. So if I go render again and submit another one, all three will be queued up here and they should start rendering very soon. You can ignore those because on the educational license, we don't actually have credits. It'll just do it for us. This is if you've got the paid version of Autodesk Fusion 360, then you'll need to purchase credits and use those to create the renders. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait for these renders to finish up, and then I'll come back and show you the results. All right, see you in a sec. Right, so the renders are finished, and these are the results, as you can see. Oh, hello. Now, if you look at this image here, you can see that there's some funky effects happening in the render, and it happens in some of these other ones as well. And the problem is where you've got effectively two glass materials meeting, it's not quite sure how to render it, so you've got this kind of stripy effect going on. Now, when I've had this in the past, what I've found you need to do is there's a couple of things to try. Number one is maybe change the glass material from, I think this was medium color glass, to maybe one of the others. Or what's more likely, in fact, if I just show you, there you go. So there's a close-up of the rendering, so you can see it in a bit more detail. And in the other views, it does it around the cork as well. But apart from changing what appearance you've applied, there's another trick to try as well here, which should help us. And that is, if I go back into my design space, so out of the render space completely and into the design workspace, the component that is, which one is it? So number 6 is the liquid, and number 2 is the cork. What we'll do is we'll shrink these slightly. We'll scale them down just so that the two surfaces aren't meeting in exactly the same place. So in a real world environment, obviously, if there's a liquid inside the bottle, the liquid would fully meet the glass, obviously. But because you've got those two surfaces in the same place, so the inner surface of the bottle and the outer surface of the liquid, because they're in the same place, it's creating some funny effects in terms of how it renders. So let's grab body number 6, and we'll go into the modify menu and we'll go to scale. So what we can try is uniform scaling, and we're going to make this 0.99 maybe. Let's try that. Okay, so 0.99, so it's 99% of the size it was, which means it's just pulled away from the inside of that bottle slightly. Let's do the same with the cork. So select body 2, and we'll go to scale again, and we'll go 0.99. Enter, and you can see even in this preview here, you can see that these stripes aren't showing so much. Okay, so let's try it one more time. Actually, I think maybe you should shrink it slightly more. So we'll go to scale, and it's scaling around. Where is it scaling around? Where's the point? So it's scaling around this point. That's why you can still see it here. So maybe I've not done that right. Let me go undo. Let's undo that, and let's do the same on the bottle. Undo that. So it's important to select the scaling point, because that's the point it will sort of shrink towards. So I'm going to shrink the lid, and the point doesn't have to be perfectly in the center, but let's say I pick this point. That's close enough. 0.99. In the preview, you can see there's none of those stripes appearing, and that's because the cork has pulled away slightly from the inside of that glass. Let's do the same then with body 6. So I know I've already done this, but I just undid it, so let's try it again. So where are we? Scale. And the point for this one, you can see the point it's using is, where is the point it's using? It did appear. It's over there. That's not what we want. So let's use, is there a point on the base we can select? Let's just make sure that point is where we think it is. Yeah, so we'll shrink towards that point there. Let's go 0.99, enter. So if you zoomed right in, you could theoretically see the gap there. But for the purposes of these renders, actually having it pulled away slightly from the inside of the glass should mean that that problem is solved. And depending on the materials you've chosen, sometimes this will happen, sometimes it won't. So I've had times before where it hasn't happened, and I've had times where, like just then, it did. So let's go back to the rendering workspace. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run these renders again. So these were the original 3 renders. I'm going to run 3 more now, and I will come back to you when the results are in, so we can have a look and hopefully have our final renders. So it's kind of good that this happened, because what it does is it shows you if this happens to you, this is what to do about it. And like I say, I think it's more to do with the fact that those two surfaces are in the same place rather than materials. As I say, sometimes depending on your material choice, it doesn't happen. But in this example, it obviously did. So let's see what the new results are like and whether it happens again. Back in a sec. Okie dokie. So those renderings have finished. I've still got a couple running at the minute, but let me just show you what they've come out like. So here we are. So shrinking down that the liquid portion of this really has worked. There's none of those stripes that there were there before, and even in the cork up here, even in the cork at the top, you can't see them either. So that seems to be the best way of going about it, is just shrinking that inside layer and shrinking the cork slightly, so that those two surfaces, the outer surface of the liquid and the inner surface of the bottle, aren't in exactly the same place. It probably tells Fusion that you need to look through the glass layer before rendering the liquid layer, which just helps it to render properly. So that is it. That is the end of the video series. If you would like to like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. and keep an eye out for future tutorials. Thank you very much. See you soon.